Hi, everyone. Welcome to an Awake webinar. And I'm so honored to have Zaidy Charron here today. And the title of this webinar is Building Resilience with Ayurveda. And why it's so exciting to me is winter just won't let go, it seems, here in Evergreen, at least where I live. And I've had that sneak peek of feeling like excited about spring. And I even had my flip-flops on the other day. And I'm really looking forward to learning how to be and how to take care of myself through all the different seasons that we have. And we have Zaidy here today, and I'll just give you a few sentences about Zaidy so you can have an idea, but you'll get to know her just through her teachings. But Zaidy is a dedicated artist of embodiment, a Boricua medicine woman, firekeeper, student, and facilitator. I love that you're a firekeeper. I want to hear about that. Right here in Denver. So she's in our hometown. She's going to be at the Denver Yoga Gathering in a couple weeks as well. So we get to be with her in person. And her main passion lies in sharing her heart's medicine through various modalities such as Ayurveda, movement, alchemy, yoga, sacred songs, herbalism, meditation, breathwork, and abuela. I knew I'd forget that. How do you say abuela wisdom?
Yes.
Yes. All right.
Grandmother wisdom.
Yeah, the grandmother wisdom. That's what we need in this culture more than ever. And today on this webinar, the basic stuff we're going to cover is you're going to get a brief overview of Ayurveda, which is huge because there's so many cool terms and things that we need to learn. And then there'll be three main bullet points that we'll cover today. We're going to acknowledge the impact of the changing seasons on how we feel. We're going to learn some actionable steps, which I always love. Like we can learn so much, but what can we really like apply? So we're going to learn some actionable steps to navigate this transition from winter and spring into summer. And then maybe even some movement practices to enhance our resilience and vitality. So yeah, honored to have you, Zaidy. Thanks for leading this today, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm happy that you guys are joining us, whether you're joining now or later on going to watch the recording. Like Eric said, I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner based here in Denver, and I've been studying at Alandi Ashram in Boulder, Colorado for the past 4 years. And in June, I'll be graduating as an Ayurvedic doctor. So I've had in that program over 4,000 hours so far of clinical and educational experience. So it's been super expansive for me. And I'm always so happy to share my love of Ayurveda and help people find ways to cultivate more balance and cultivate more vitality in their life. And through that, we do that with diet, lifestyle counseling, herbalism, and movement practices and breathwork, all sorts of great things. So I figured I'd start out by giving you guys a brief overview of what Ayurveda is, because I'm sure some of you probably are very familiar with Ayurveda, while others it might be a little bit newer for you. So Ayurveda is a system of medicine that comes from India, and it has roots of over 5,000 years. And it's a method of healing. It really is a system of medicine and a system of healing. And we use diet and lifestyle counseling as well as herbalism, adjunct therapies, lots of oil therapies, bodywork therapies, cleansing therapies, and rejuvenating therapies to cultivate balance and well-being in the body. And at the foundation of Ayurveda is we look at the body as a microcosm of the macrocosm, meaning that all of the elements that exist beyond the body also exist within our bodies. And the 5 elements that we draw from are earth, water, fire, air, and space. So it's like similar to Chinese medicine, but we draw from different elements, right? So you can think of the earth element on a macrocosmic level. We're going to see the earth as any like physical structure in our field, whether it's like you're looking at a tree or the dirt or the soil, right? And then how that shows up in the microcosmic level in the body is going to be the physical structure and form of the body, like the bones and the flesh and the muscle and the tissues. Then we have the water element, and that's, in the macrocosmic level, that's going to be the oceans, the rivers, the streams. Internally, it's going to show up as the fluids within our body, like the blood and the lymph and our saliva. We have the fire element, right? We have the sun. Externally, we have one of, was it Timothy? Yeah, Timothy's by the fire right now with the fire element. And internally, that's going to show up in these processes of digestion, absorption, and assimilation in the body. So whether that transformation is happening on a cellular level, or whether you're literally digesting your food, that's like being cooked and processed through the fire element. Then we have the air element. So externally, that's showing up as the winds. And internally, you're going to see that as the breath, of course. And then any form of movement, the air element is moving that. So like the blood, the movement of blood, the movement of lymph, the movement of the breath, all those things are happening through the air element, the movement of the mind, right? And then we have the space element. And I like to think of the space element is the container for all of the other elements. It's holding everything. So internally, that's going to show up as like our vessels and all of the crevices and spaces within the body is the manifestation of the space element. And there's actually so much space in our bodies. Then we combine the elements to create what are called the doshas. And that's like a very common thing in Ayurveda to talk about vata, pitta, and kapha. And that's at the foundation of everything. So vata dosha, which is the combination of the air and space elements, is our first dosha, and that is governed by movement, or it governs movement. So just like I was kind of describing the air element, how it's moving everything inside of the body, that's what vata is doing as well, like through the transmission of the air element, and then it's also the space element. So, for example, if a person is a vata person, and this is their just innate nature from birth, they're going to tend to be a little bit lighter in their bodies throughout their life. They're going to have a tendency to maybe have drier, rough skin. We definitely live in a very vata environment in Colorado. It's very dry and spacious, right? But an imbalanced vata is going to be very creative. They have this beautiful capacity to connect with more ethereal, clear, subtle realms, whether it's like through a meditation practice, if they're able to quiet the mobility in their mind, right? And then an out of balance vata, an out of balance air and space element person is going to have a tendency to be anxious, maybe impulsive, and like feeling scattered and lacking routine. So the best things that we can do for a vata person is to create a routine for that person. And then we have pitta. Pitta is the combination of the water and fire elements. And I like to think of it more as fire and liquid, kind of like oil, because there is a hot quality to a pitta. When I think of water, for some reason, I think of cold water. So I like to say a fire and liquid. So pitta people also tend to be a little bit light in their body, but they're going to be a little bit more muscular. There's a sharp quality to pitta as well. So these people are very intelligent, driven, organized beings. They make really good leaders. They tend to be hot while vatas tend to be cold. And if a pitta person's feeling out of balance, they might tend towards anger and irritability and even burnout, like overworking themselves. And then an imbalanced pitta is going to be passionate, also driven person. Passionate, driven leaders is a really good balanced pitta. Pittas have trouble dropping out of their minds and entering their heart. So when they're able to access the heart space, it's like they're unstoppable, beautiful beings. And then like vatas, they have trouble with impulsivity. They need routine. And then finally, we have our kapha friends, and we'll be talking about a lot about kapha today. And kapha is the combination of the earth and water elements, and they tend to have a little bit more heaviness and density in their body, just like more structure, more form because of that earth element. Like pittas, kaphas and pittas, they have that water element, so they have an oily quality to them. So they're going to tend to have oilier skin, hair, and nails as well. Kaphas just tend to have smooth, soft, beautiful, luscious skin, hair, and nails. They're just really beautiful beings. But there is a sticky and dull quality to kapha as well. So they have a tendency to get stuck on things, which, in society now that can be good. Like they're good at saving things and accumulating things. But, they might get stuck in the morning and not have trouble getting out of bed, or they might get stuck on something that happened to them in the past or whatever it is. And then there's a dull quality too. So sometimes it can create a dull mind, which can be like foggy in the brain, or it might tend towards leaning towards like depression or something like that. Kaphas are the most loyal, loving, compassionate people you'll ever meet. But again, they have a tendency to get stuck on things. So that's a basic overview of the three doshas, vata, pitta, and kapha, and how they're connected to the elements. And basically, upon conception, we receive our own unique ratio of the elements or the doshas, and that's called our constitution or our prakriti. And that's your baseline of well-being. So through a lifetime of imbalance, whether it's in or out of your control, the elements in your body are going to typically increase. Sometimes they decrease. But your idea of well-being and balance is coming back into your baseline of what your true nature is. So for example, I have a little bit higher of a vata dosha in my constitution, but I'm not too, I mean, pitta and kapha are not far behind. So I'm always really working to find ways to soothe my vata dosha and bring me back really into balance. I'm always going to have a little bit more vata no matter what, but I'm also going to have a tendency to become out of balance in that point as well. Yeah, and
Could I
so it's
pop
just
something in here? Or
yeah.
I just want to make sure I got it. So all of us will have a balance of vata, pitta, and kapha energy. And is it cool to call it energy? Is that what
Yeah, you
you
can
would
call it
say? Or
energy. Yeah, I think
okay.
energy is a good way. Or like elements, doshas.
And so we'll all have a different balance of those three that is kind of best for us, it sounds like. And sometimes we got out of balance, and sometimes we're in balance. So
Mhm.
like working with Ayurveda, is it mainly about trying to help us get back into balance, that is our natural state of those three, and helping to
Yeah.
balance them? Or
Yeah, exactly. You can look
okay.
at it like a blueprint, like your constitution or your elemental blueprint. So for example, say you and I had the same exact imbalances happen in our life for a whole life. We had the same exact life experiences, ate the same things, did all the same things, right? But since you and I have different constitutions, I'm going to assume, because most of us do, since we have different constitutions, the way I would approach supporting you to create balance would be different than the way I would support myself because we have different blueprints. So that's why Ayurveda is so cool. It's such an individual and unique system of medicine. And there's so many factors at play, but everything is going to be individualized for the person because of we all have different constitutions. And even if we had the same constitution, again, there's different life experiences. We have different genetic predispositions and traumas, things like that. So everything's really going to be individualized that way.
Cool. So it's going to feel, working with an Ayurvedic doctor will feel probably like you're really seen for your own unique
Oh, yeah.
way of being.
Yeah. And
And the
that's what we get.
solution for someone with different doshas or different balances might be different, even if we're trying to kind of solve the same problem. Is that
Exactly.
okay? Okay.
Exactly. It's really cool that way.
Customized.
It's custom. Yeah, it's very custom, very individualized. And, in our clinic, when we meet with people, we typically do an initial appointment for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and we're getting a comprehensive health history, asking about trauma, things like that. And that's a common feedback that we get from people is like, I've never felt so seen before or heard. And there's something so healing about just sitting with somebody for that amount of time and getting the comprehensive history with them and then teaching them how to understand themselves as an individual with their elemental balances as well. So it's a really beautiful and healing in different ways when than just taking the herbs and everything. Just having the conversation can be really supportive as well. Cool.
Cool.
So now we will talk about acknowledging the impact of changing seasons on our well-being. So just as we in our bodies have our own elemental blueprint or doshic blueprint, so do the seasons. Each season has its own doshic blueprint. So especially living in Colorado, we have our 4 seasons here, and this is going to adjust depending on the climate and region that you live in and how your seasons work as well. So for example, if you lived in Puerto Rico, it's going to look differently because there's just no winter. I mean, there's winter there, but it's not going to be the same as how it shows up here in Colorado. So I'll speak more to the classic traditional 4 seasons, and then you can apply it in ways that works for you and your environment. So we have the summertime, and I'll end with the spring because that's what we're sitting with right now, and that's what we're going to be really talking about today. So the summertime is obviously going to be a fire element season. So the macrocosmic expression is going to be more of the pitta dosha, fire and water elements. So that's marked by the increased heat in the environment. And especially living where I live in Denver, it just feels like the summer never ends. And as we get further and further closer to the fall, the accumulation of heat just continues to increase in the body. One of the basic fundamental principles of Ayurveda that makes it just like, it's like the one sentence that you need to know. And once you know this sentence, then you can apply it to anything to create balance, is like increases like, and the opposite heals. Right? So, for example, if it's the summertime and it's pitta season and it's hot, right? And we can even perpetuate that. And say you're talking to a pitta person, so they already have accumulated heat in their body, they're in the heat of the season, and they apply more heat to their body. So they start to eat really spicy curry, right? That's going to increase the heat in their body. So that's like increases like. If they were to apply the opposite action of something heating, so the opposite would be something cooling, and that doesn't necessarily mean eating a cold food, but something cooling like a coconut product, cilantro, cucumbers, things like that, those cooling foods are going to reduce the internal temperature for that person. So that's what we think about when we think of the macrocosmic expressions of the elements. Like increases like, and the opposite heals. That's like Ayurveda 101. It's that easy. It's like, there's your degree. Like increases like, the opposite heals. So then we have the fall season, which is characterized by Vata, the air and space elements. It's super dry here in Colorado in the Vata season in the fall. The wind picks up. There's more mobility in the atmosphere as well. Things are getting dry and crunchy, and they're falling to the earth. So we have that increase of the Vata dosha. And I could talk about supporting Vata all day, every day, but today it's irrelevant. We can talk about that another time. Then we move from Vata season into Kapha season. Kapha season, which is what we're in right now, which is characterized by the earth and water elements. It has like, there's two sections of Kapha season. So the first half of Kapha season is in the winter time. We can call it like more like the second half of the winter time, when we're in the depths of winter, when things are really cold, things are frozen. It feels like the earth is frozen. That's when we have this like strong accumulation of the earth element, right? It's dense, it's thick, it's cold, right? Everything's like wanting to hibernate and be with the earth. But then as we move from the winter into the springtime, Kapha begins to warm up, and it moves from that earth element and more into the water element. So we call this time of year the time of the year when Kapha begins to liquefy, right? And you can feel that external expression of Kapha liquefying, like, right, today's snowy, it's a little bit more earthy, but it's already kind of melting for me. So that melting of the snow is like the melting of Kapha. And we can feel that expression in our body too. What I've noticed for myself over the past couple of weeks as Kapha is beginning to liquefy in my body, I've been waking up with just like a little bit of stuffiness in my face and in my nose. And I feel like I have to blow my nose every morning, which I don't typically have to do during the whole year. But as it's liquefying, I'm like, okay, there's obviously an accumulation of Kapha in my body, and it's showing up by waking up with a needing to blow my nose. So what can I do to release this Kapha now so it doesn't stick around and linger later on? Something really cool about the word Kapha, the proper Sanskrit pronunciation for Kapha is Kapha, right? Kapha, the PH is P like that, but it's people just agree and accept the word Kapha. So that's why we call it Kapha. But the origin of the word Kapha shares a similar origin with the word cough. So when I think of Kapha, I think of coughing, and like that accumulation of mucus and phlegm is going to be attributed to Kapha. In Ayurveda, the root of most diseases is going to start in our digestive tract, and then it spreads, those doshas will spread beyond the body and lodge into weak spots. So the seat of Kapha is actually in the stomach, right? So you can imagine if you have an accumulation of Kapha, it's going to actually build up in your stomach. And then when it begins to spill over, it's going to have some sort of connection. It's also seated in your lungs, and it might show up as some sort of mucus, phlegm, those types of things that would make you need to blow your nose in the morning, right? Other symptoms of increased accumulated Kapha that could be happening for people right now would be weight gain over the winter time. It could be feeling tired, having brain fog, feeling dull, having trouble getting out of bed in the morning. It can show up as nausea. Nausea is always a symptom of Kapha because of that connection to the stomach. And then again, any upper respiratory type of infections are going to be some sort of connection and relationship to Kapha. Because Kapha is liquefying during this time of year, a lot of people tend to get sick during this time of year as well because of that. So So if like increases like and the opposite heals, we want to apply the opposite actions, the opposite of the earth and water elements, or the opposite of the kapha qualities to our lifestyle and diet in order to cultivate balance right now. And like I said earlier, if especially in these seasonal transitions, it's really important to take a look and inventory. Okay, I'm just coming towards the end-ish of kapha season. How is kapha accumulated in my body, and how can I clear it from my system now so that it doesn't stick around and cause issues down the line? So every season we want to assess, like if at the end of the summer I'm assessing how is the heat in my body showing up? Do I need to do some sort of like miniature way of detoxifying the heat from my body so that it's not going to stick around and lead to something else? Okay.
So
So,
could I ask a quick question?
yes.
So if this time of year we're feeling kind of tired, brain fog, some nausea from the gut piece, and the chest could be tighter or stuff going on there, um, what would be an example of like increasing like and the opposite heals? Like what can we do to,
Yeah.
is there anything we can do to feel better? Or are
Yeah.
you covering that later? I just,
I'll
that
actually
really lands
that'll
for me.
that'll tell me exactly where I'm going now.
Okay.
So I'll give you guys like three of my favorite things to do during kapha season that I always recommend to people. And even if I'm like working with a client and it's whatever season it is, and I see they have a kapha imbalance, what I'm about to share right now is the first thing that I always tell people to reach for or do. So if like increases like in the opposite heals, one of the common, so dull is a word that's associated with kapha, right? It's a gun, it's a quality of kapha is dull. And I know I used the description of dullness in the mind earlier, but kapha always also, sorry, has a tendency to have dull, slow digestion, especially during this time of year. So you'll wake up in the morning, you're like, I'm not hungry until 2 p.m., right? And then you eat food, whatever. Afterwards, you feel tired and fatigued, and things are just moving slowly. And you're like, I don't eat anything. Why am I like not losing any weight right now? Like, this is really weird. That's typically because there's some sort of dull, slow digestion happening. And we actually call that manda agni. That's translated as slow digestion, slow digestive fire. So you can use the metaphor of a fire, like a campfire or a yagna fire, and it's like a dim fire. It's just a little bit, and you can't add a bunch of fuel to that fire because it's going to actually dampen it if I put a bunch of logs on there. So how can I like slowly kindle and build that fire up to make things function at a better rate? So my favorite thing for kaphas to do, and we all have this probably in our kitchen to some degree, is to sip on fresh ginger tea throughout the day. And ginger, and I say fresh ginger because dried ginger is very heating, and it for a lot of people can actually be aggravating for their digestion and be too pitta. It's going to increase pitta too much for a lot of people. So we fresh ginger is a little bit more, it's just going to be more palatable and going to be supportive for everybody. If
Just
fresh
like grate it up and stick it in some hot water. Is it that simple or?
Yeah, there's a few ways you can do it. So if you want to do it like legitimately, you're going to cut up some ginger and you're going to put it in water and you're going to simmer it for 10 to 20 minutes on a
Okay.
stove, and then you'll strain it and then you can drink that throughout the day. If you're in a rush or a hurry, I'll just tell people put some fresh ginger at the bottom of your hot water, drink that throughout the day. You can chew on it once you get to the bottom and like really receive that sharp quality of the ginger. I have a client like right now who loves the ginger that they give at Japanese restaurants. And so I would, he doesn't want to do, it's a kid. So you got to work with kids, how kids can do. And I was like, okay, you're not going to drink the ginger tea, but enjoy your pickled ginger before your meals. So the ginger again is tikshna, it's sharp, and that sharpness is gonna be a good kindling for the digestive fire and get things moving. It's also really supportive for nausea. Like when I'm nauseous, ginger tea with a little bit of licorice root is always gonna really help with my nausea because it's gonna help kind of burn for lack of better words, burn the kapha and move things forward. If fresh ginger is too heating for a person, if they have a tendency to get acid reflux or something like that, or just like heat under their skin from the ginger hot flashes, whatever it is, then I tell the person they can add licorice root to that tea. And licorice root's a little bit more cooling, but it also helps reduce kapha. It's so rejuvenating. Like to me, the combination of ginger, turmeric, and licorice root is a dream team for sure. And the brand Rishi actually has a ginger, turmeric, licorice tea that is so delicious. That's actually when I fell in love with licorice root, was when I started drinking that tea. So yeah, and I have some cool recipes for the tea that I can send you guys. Also, another thing that people can do before meals to help stimulate their digestion. It's like the sushi people got it right, right? They're eating ginger, you're eating ginger, cleansing your palate before a meal, and you're stimulating your digestion. Like that is so brilliant to me, right? And so we have this recipe in Ayurveda that we call Agni Kindler, which Agni means fire, but when I'm saying it just like that, I'm usually talking about the digestive fire. So how can we kindle our digestive fire? So I suggest for people to grate fresh ginger with some fresh turmeric. You add a little salt and some lime or lemon, stir it up, and you have about half a teaspoon to a teaspoon before a meal, 5 minutes, 10 minutes before a meal. And I promise you, you'll most likely you're going to get hungry for that meal when you take that pre-digestive kind of formula. So ginger is kapha's best friend. And it's really cool. Like when we talk about these simple things that people can start doing in their diet and lifestyle, it just seems like, oh, she told me to drink ginger, like whatever. But if you actually do it and drink it throughout the day, it's going to create a lot of relief for the kapha symptoms. And I just see that time and time again in our clinic. For example, like cumin, coriander, fennel tea is a common one that we suggest for people. And when they actually drink it, when they're actually drinking that stuff, it helps with a lot of their poor digestive symptoms. Ginger can help with gas, bloating, and again, it's really going to support with sluggish digestion. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so my next one is to increase the bitter taste in your meals. So Ayurveda is really passionate. We're really passionate about eating all six tastes and getting six tastes in each meal. The six tastes are sweet, sour, salty, pungent, so like spicy pungent, bitter, and astringent. One of the most nourishing tastes, or I guess balancing tastes for kapha, is going to be the bitter taste, because bitter induces a quality of lightness in the body, but there's also like a sharp quality to the bitter as well. And I always like Dr. Lott always says, bitter is better. So when you're grocery shopping, when you're in the produce department, you're looking at your vegetables, it's like, where can I get my bitter taste into this meal? Bitters also, most bitter foods are full of alkaloids. So that acts typically as medicine for the body. And depending on obviously the plant. And it's also helps with blood sugar regulation as well. So it's going to help people, if somebody has prediabetes or something, like increasing the bitter taste is going to be really important. So different places that you can get your bitter taste from include, well, the most bitter vegetable that I've ever had in my life is called bitter gourd. And I'm not sure if you guys have ever tried it, but it kind of looks like a spiky green zucchini. That's what it looks like to me. But you have to get it from like an Asian market. I actually saw it. I was in Peru over the winter and they were selling bitter gourd on the street. I was very excited about that. So it's not just strictly to Asia, like India and China. They're actually eating it in Peru as well, in the Andes. So bitter gourd, that's a really powerful bitter vegetable, and people will even powder it and take it as a supplement to support with blood sugar as well. So you can get that at places like Banyan Botanicals if you wanted to get it in a supplement form. Other bitter foods include, I always am purchasing dandelion greens. That's typically where I'm sourcing my bitter taste from. I love dandelion greens. And what's so cool, it's the springtime and the earth is giving us what we need, right? The spring, some of the first things that come up in the springtime are the dandelions, right? And then like the colder season vegetables like broccoli, kale, I'm pretty sure Brussels sprouts are a colder season vegetable. Like all those things sprouting up in the spring, the earlier vegetables to come are typically bitter, and the earth is literally providing us with the food that we need to cultivate balance during this time of year. Some other bitter superstars are obviously going to be chocolate. Chocolate is a wonderful source of bitter. Obviously, you have to be careful with, if you're getting chocolate with all sorts of things in it, like dairy and lots of sugar and stuff. So really sticking with like maybe like a ceremonial grade cacao or just a bitter chocolate is really good. And it's interesting, most Americans, I guess you could say, I don't know if I could speak on a global level, but a lot of people around the world too love coffee, right? And coffee is an excellent source of the bitter taste. And I think one of the reasons why people have such a habit or addiction for coffee is because it's feeding that bitter taste that they don't get everywhere else in their meals. It's a harder taste for us to get in our meals. Ayurvedically, we're not a big fan of drinking a bunch of coffee because of what caffeine can do for the body. Of course, there's beautiful health benefits to coffee, but we're like more concerned about the caffeine. So my suggestion is to try to source bitter from other places, like the chocolate. Pretty much any leafy green is going to be bitter. And then of course, bitter gourd. The other leafy greens too, like there's going to have an astringent quality as well, and that's also going to be good for kapha. So basically, if it's green and it comes from the earth, make it your friend during kapha season, but especially the bitter, like dandelion greens, I think is going to be the easiest thing to source. At least I know that in Denver. And then when you do eat these vegetables, we have a preference to cooked foods over raw foods in Ayurveda, just because we, as a fire keeper or fire worshiper, right? If you use the metaphor of your digestion as a fire, we become fire keepers and fire worshippers in our own body. Everything that we put into our body is an offering into our inner fire. And so when we cook our food, we're pre-digesting the food so that it's easier for our body to digest the food, which helps us digest things properly. And so things don't linger on. Different foods are digested at different rates. So the cooked things well spiced with spices like cumin, coriander, and fennel, fresh ginger, turmeric, those types of things are all going to be really supportive for digestion, and especially using those more pungent spices during kapha season. And that doesn't necessarily mean like eating really spicy chilies and things that are going to create indigestion, but just a little bit more pungency can be supportive during this time with that. Okay. And then my third tip during kapha season is honestly, this time of year in the spring is an excellent time to do a cleanse. In Ayurveda, we have our traditional cleanse is called a panchakarma, which means the 5 actions. And I've just read so many cleansing books from different people, different theories, and I'm always like, this sounds so much like a panchakarma to me, but they're just describing it in a different way. So really any type of cleanse that you can do during this time, especially if there's going to be, some sort of like liver, if it's like a liver cleanse, usually they're going to give you a bunch of bitter herbs anyways. So that's going to be supportive for kapha. But panchakarma is an excellent thing to do right now during this time of year. We like to do it during seasonal junctions. And the reason we do that is exactly what I said earlier. It's like, let me look back at the season that I just experienced and how has this element or this dosha accumulated in my body, and what can I do now to clear that dosha or the increase of those elements in my body out. So what a panchakarma looks like, typically it means the 5 actions. So the 5 actions of panchakarma, and we don't do all of these in the United States, and we also do them in different ways. If you are to do it in the US, like an at-home panchakarma, it's different if you went to India and you went to a center and they were taking care of everything. But the 3 actions, or sorry, before I get into it, this is kind of the type of cleanse that you would want to do with a practitioner. There are ways that, like, I do have at-home ones that you can just like do a mono diet and take it easy. There's certain things that you can do that's less prescriptive. But if you are going to do a true panchakarma, I would recommend working with an Ayurvedic practitioner, an Ayurvedic doctor, so they can give you a custom uh, system, right? A custom cleanse, something that's going to work for you, because there are contraindications and it can be dangerous if you're doing something without knowing the implications that it will have on your body. And you'll hear why when I talk about the 5 actions of panchakarma. So the first action is when you do panchakarma, there's going to be a nausea therapy. So that's putting medicated herbal oils up your nose that are going to break through the blood-brain barrier and support the brain and the nervous system, typically sinuses and other things as well. We also do what's called vamana, which is vomiting therapies. Again, like we don't typically do that in the United States, but that's going to support kapha, the accumulation of kapha in the stomach. We have which is purgative therapies, which is going to help pitta, which is seated in the small intestine. So that's taking herbs that make you go to the bathroom a lot. Then we have vastis, which are enemas. So we do oil and herbal medicated enemas for the colon, which is the seat of vata. Rakta moksha, which is bloodletting, traditionally using leeches, which we don't do in the United States. And Vasti, and Virachin. I think I got them all. That's all 5 of them. But during that week that you would do a panchakarma, you would be eating a mono diet of khichdi, which is rice and mung beans with some sort of spices. Sometimes we'll be nice and let people eat vegetables if they can't even imagine doing a mono diet. And then there's a lot of oil and sweating therapy. So we're really big on full body oil massage, followed by heat application. And the reason we do that in panchakarma is, I love this saying in yoga, the issues get lodged in the tissues, right? On an emotional level. Well, it's really similar in Ayurveda because if a dosha spills over from the digestive tract, it gets actually lodged into the tissues and so the idea is when we're doing these oil therapies, we're pulling those doshas back into the digestive tract, applying the heat to help the channels pull it back in there. And then we're doing like the vomiting, the purging through stool and the enemas to actually clear out that accumulation of dosha in the digestive tract. So any type of cleanse, that's just a panchakarma overview. I have a blog post that goes way more into detail of what that process looks like. After we cleanse the person, we build them back up with rejuvenating fun things like dates and ghee and all the good, delicious things. But you have to go through the cleanse first to get there. But any type of cleanse, of course, educating yourself and understanding what you're getting into and making sure that it's coming from a reputable source and place and there's understanding around it, but really any cleanse during this time of year is going to be optimal for well-being.
So we don't just cleanse the house in the spring cleaning, we clean the body as well.
Yeah, I
during
love
this
that.
transition.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like the inner spring cleaning. And of course, like I have a friend, well, I guess Ramadan is different because Ramadan can happen in the summer. I guess it can happen any time of the year. So that might not be a good example, but Ramadan is happening right now, and people are fasting all day long and then eating in the evening. And I was talking to my friend who's doing that, and I was like, wow, it's just like a beautiful, like Ayurvedic, it's like a cleanse, right? The fasting is like a cleanse, but it's also a cleansing of the mind and the spirit and everything else that's incorporated with that. But you will see like there are a lot of different religious traditions that have some sort of like fasting or cleanse during this time of year. Catholicism, for example, Lent, right? There's some sort of cleansing happening, whether it's like through prayer in the mind, or maybe people are giving up certain things like alcohol or sugar or whatever.
There's a reason why so many traditions agree that this is a time of year to do this. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, and the 3 things I heard is lots of ginger this time of year can help increase greens with a bitter taste, especially, and then cleansing. So that can help us with the transition from winter, spring into summer, and to clear out the kapha.
Yep. So it doesn't stick around. And I love what you said, spring cleaning. Like that's just along with the cleanse idea, the same thing, clearing your house, right? Clearing, like letting go of relationships that aren't serving you right now, like really taking inventory and letting go of things so that you have the foundation to, let your flowers fruit. Right. Awesome. So those are my actionable steps. And then movement practice to enhance resiliency and vitality during this unique time of year in late winter and early spring. So as a yoga asana teacher, I love to plan my yoga practices and classes from an Ayurvedic lens. And so I'm looking at the elemental forces happening outside of us externally. And we have the water and the earth elements. So if I want to apply like increases like in the opposite heals, if I want to apply the opposite actions in my yoga practices to support other people, because we're all having this macrocosmic influence from the season, what are things that I can apply to my practice to create balance and harmony? So The two things that I have been teaching a lot of recently, which surprise, one of them is going to be actually I have three things that I've been teaching a lot of. So the first one is I like to do fire elemental practices during this time of year to support with the liquefaction of kapha, right? The heat is going to help liquefy the earth, bring it into a liquid, and then we can cleanse it from our body. So fire elemental practices are going to look like, doing more vigorous movement practices. It's going to be doing Surya Namaskar A and B, or whatever Namaskar practice that you have that's a little bit more solar, invigorating. I don't want to necessarily say that you're moving quicker, but there is going to be more of like this focused strength and linearity in those practices to get things heated and moving. I also, to cultivate the fire element in yoga asana, I like to really work with hand balancing shapes during this time. So this past week, I've been teaching a lot of bakasana poses or crane, like hand balancing shapes. It's a great time to do handstands, really like all the like fire hand practices, right? Um, there's a lot of hand balancing. It's like
Is that
yoga's
like
most.
when you go forward into crow, like you put your hands down and then you go up?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. So anything on your hands is going to really increase the heat element. Also, working with your gaze, like drishti with gaze in your yoga practice, one of the seats of the fire element is in the eyes. So whether you're doing a candle meditation by gazing at a flame and you're imagining that flame like pulling into you through your eyes, through your gaze, that practice is going to help invoke the fire element. And I cue a lot more towards gaze if I'm doing a fire practice. Of course, we like cue it in yoga practices, but it's like there's a special extra attention to what you're looking at in the practice. And linearity is really good for a fire element that creates a sense of focus and concentration as opposed to doing something more like flowy, right? When we do like the flowy stuff, that's going to perpetuate the water element. So the linearity of the fire is really nice. And I like to experience that with the gaze and through a namaskar practice. And then, of course, it takes a lot of focus and attention to balance on your hands. In those practices, too, another way to work with the fire element is like deep twisting, right?
Mhm.
Because of how that's connected to Manipura chakra, right in the center at our solar plexus, right? And that's the fire in the chakra system is going to be rooted in the solar plexus. So deep twisting is going to help that process of connecting to the fire element as well. And there's like some detoxifying components too, right? We're working with the organs there as well. And then so twisting, hand balancing, and then finally, I really like to work with like ecstatic back bending during this time of year, more
Mhm.
linear back bending than like there's different types of back bending, but something that's more linear. And so when we're doing that, we're working with the movement of prana or the movement of energy called Udana Vayu, right? It's like kind of this up and outward movement of energy. And and so if the earth and water are super close to the ground, right? It's like the most gross thing is kapha, the kapha dosha. We apply the opposite action. So that's like a earth and water very apana vayu. That's like this downward movement, this connection to the earth, this rooting in. So if I apply the opposite movement of prana, this udana vayu, this up and out action, that's going to be expressed through a back bend, right? So any sort of heart opening practices, speaking to the heart, things like that, but things that are going to be uplifting, inspiring. And I also like to think of like springtime, it's going to be reflected in the springtime when you plant a seed and it sprigs up from the earth, like that action of rising up, like we can have that same experience in our yoga practice through more ecstatic, linear, heart opening shapes.
Mm.
Yeah.
So time to get into fire mode
Yeah,
this time of
fire
year.
and I
Okay.
would say fire and air and
And
some
then our physical practice is more vigorous this time of year. Some hand balances are good. Really focused dristi, like our gaze, and lots of twisting. You said, and back bends, getting the heart open.
Mhm.
And these are all things that burn up the. Did I get that right? Like it burns up the water or the stuckness of winter and spring, and gets us ready
Yeah.
for
It gets
summer.
you unstuck, right?
Unstuck.
Gets
Yeah.
things unstuck and flowing.
Like if
Really is
we've been hibernating all winter in a way, like this is the unstuck coming out.
unstuck coming out. Yep.
Oh,
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Is this a good time if Allison or Timothy had any questions or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know if they're, if you guys want to just unmute, if you have any questions about what we've been talking about, this is a good time.
Not really, I don't. Just absorbing some information. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I don't have anything either. I was just I've been noticing the back bending, like appreciating just a lot of chest opening, like heart opening procedures that are like they're feeling a lot better right now. I didn't have a name for it, but yeah, I guess is it yeah, I think I have like a pitta. I think I've been told anyway. I'm not super
Mhm.
familiar with Ayurveda, but like I've been told I have a pitta dosha, and so I don't suppose that would change anything, especially just moving into summer like this. Like you would probably across the board apply the same techniques right now.
Yeah, I would definitely apply the same techniques, but I would be a little bit more like you still have to be aware of your pitta within it all. So since pitta is sensitive to heat, so for example, the ginger thing, if you're
Mm.
eating fresh ginger all day, that might be maybe too heating for you. So you could balance it out by adding licorice root, or just notice if you are eating fresh ginger tea all day or whatever in the morning, whatever, and it creates some sort of heat in your body, like too much uncomfortable heat, then you could take a step back and add something that's going to balance it out, which would be like the licorice root. And then with the yoga practice, just, pittas are so driven. They're the yoga students when you're like, okay, you can like do a push-up if you want, and then they do 10, right? So you have to
Yeah,
like,
sounds right.
you have to like check your pitta and be like, okay, like, am I doing this to create balance or is this actually dysregulating me more?
Okay. Hmm. So to take more of a kapha route in those
Yeah.
moments, just
And
cool
just like
off a
in
little and
each moment, it's like increases like in the opposite heel. So you have to check in with yourself. How am I feeling in this moment? What is the opposite action that I can apply to create balance?
okay, that's cool.
Hmm.
And I know we all want to know our dosha is I think you mentioned before the call that you might have a resource for us to figure out our
Yeah.
dosha, or
So I'll send
is
you
it something you
to,
can do on your own, just the basics, or do you need to see a pro just to even get the basics?
I mean, you know, so the way that we determine somebody's dosha is based off of a bunch of questions. We ask a bunch of questions. We're looking at you guys physically too, because physicality of the body is going to tell us a lot about your constitution. But then we read the pulse. So in Ayurveda, we read about 63 different pulses, and one of them is the constitution pulse. And that one just doesn't lie. It will just really tell us your constitution. Sometimes I'll just set up pulse tables for people to get an idea of it. But if you want the holistic perspective of what your constitution is, it's like sitting there for an hour and a half to 2 hours, answering the questions. You get the pulse reading, you get the face, nail, tongue analysis, the full body analysis, and that's the best way to determine it. However, there is this quiz which is really helpful that you can do, and I'll put it in the chat. Is that a good place to put it?
Oh,
And you can
definitely.
take this quiz. It's on Banyan Botanicals website, so it's a great place to buy herbs and stuff. But when you do take this quiz, though, make sure that you're answering it as if your caretaker was answering it for you, so that it's your lifelong tendencies. Because if you are just talking about your current imbalances on the quiz, it's not going to give you your constitution. It's just going to tell you what your current imbalances are. So you have to think more of what your lifelong tendency has been when you answer these questions.
Okay. Right, because if you answer it like what you're currently dealing with it, it'll won't be accurate. You got to give it the whole picture of how
Hmm.
you've been. Okay,
Exactly.
cool.
And so that's
That's a great
hard
resource.
sometimes. It's hard because you're like, well, I've had this imbalance my whole life, right? So that's why the pulse reading is really helpful when we determine constitution.
Okay, and then I'm going to put in the chat as well. Zaidy is going to be at the Denver Yoga Gathering, and on April 6th, when we have a whole day of yoga, wellness, meditation, Ayurveda. We have a kirtan. We have a gong bath. It's going to be a beautiful day. And you can save 20% as a thank you for attending this webinar. And
Awesome.
we will also send this out to we'll send this out to the people who didn't get to come today live, but it does end tomorrow, which is Tuesday at 11:30 p.m. if you want to save 20%. So I'll hit go on that.
Yay.
And yeah, you guys feel free to take advantage as a thank you for being here. And then Zaidy, where can people learn more about you or practice with you? You know,
Yeah.
it sounds like
I
yoga is definitely happening.
Yeah, I teach a lot around town. I teach at a few studios, Black Swan, Yoga Center of Denver, and Rooted Heart. So you can find me there. I think the best way to find me if you have more questions, if you're considering getting a consultation or just want to, I send out a newsletter too. I think it's pretty great, but I don't know what everybody else thinks, but it's not like all advertisements. It's like some really cool blog posts and stuff. I'm really a big fan of my blog. So I'll put my website on here. It's my first and last name.com, ZaidyCharron.com. And I would just say start looking at my blog. It's pretty cool personally. So there's some really good posts on there. There's one completely dedicated to Kapha season. There's one dedicated to fire keeping, to panchakarma. There's recipes on there. So it's a fun place to get lost on.
Yeah. I know we all love recipes. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Right.
Here's my here's my Kapha season blog post. I thought it's a good place to start. I'll also put the panchakarma one on there, and then you can play around from there.
Sweet.
There we go.
And that the Kapha, this what we talked about today, so that's going to be timely.
And there's also more things on there too. There's definitely other tips besides the 3 that I gave you today on that post.
All right.
And I even like, I'm gonna put one more, I'm sorry. I like this Tejas one that I have. This one has some really cool tips of tending your inner fire, the flames of intelligence within your body. And there's a cool meditation and a breathwork practice on there as well.
So I'm curious, at Denver Yoga Gathering, will we get to do movement and yoga with you, and you'll integrate a lot of the Ayurveda, or is it more of a talk, or is it a mix? Or
It's going to be a mix. So I'm going to
Okay.
be talking about the concept of ojas, which is actually fitting for this conversation because ojas is the subtle essence of the water element. So it's very much connected to kapha. But really how it shows up in the body is like our innate resiliency or sense of resiliency to disease or adversity, trauma, all sorts of things. And a good manifestation, if you look like a little chunky baby, right? A fresh baby, and their cheeks are just like, I don't know, I can't think of a better word besides
Oh, yeah.
chunky.
Juicy is great. Yeah.
Juicy, there we go. Juicy cheeks. Like that is like the embodiment of ojas, is like seeing like a fresh, just chubby baby.
That's what I want to feel like. I like that.
Yeah. So that practice is how do we cultivate that quality? And it's really hard to describe. So there's definitely going to be a lecture to the ojas component, but I think it's something really important for us to experience. So we'll be doing a meditation and a movement practice as well. So it'll be half and half.
Oh,
And
good.
some chanting too. I like to work with certain mantras in order to cultivate these qualities as well.
Okay. So if you liked what you learned today in this brief time, definitely come to Denver Yoga Gathering on April 6th, and we'll get to hang with Zaidy in real life. I can't wait.
Yeah, and ojas is so fun to talk about and just learn about. It's such a good topic. So it's just hard to describe. But yes, join us. It'll be amazing. I'm very excited and looking forward to the gathering.
Awesome. And thanks, Allison and Timothy, for attending live today. We appreciate you spending your time with us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, Zaidy. Thanks, Eric. See you guys.
Yeah.
Okay, bye, guys.
Bye, thank you.